You're listening to the Generational Wealth Through Commercial Real Estate podcast. Your host, Will Smith, is a former NFL player that found his passion in commercial real estate. Every week, you will learn from industry experts everything you need to know to get started investing in commercial real estate to build generational wealth.
Thank you for tuning in to the Generational Wealth Through Commercial Real Estate show. It's your host, Will Smith, and I'm here today with Matt DiBara. I probably crushed his name because I tear names up, but we're going to be talking about contractors and how to pick the right kind of contractors today. But before we get into that, if you're watching this show for the first time, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. You know, I want to keep adding value to you guys. So when you subscribe, it lets me see that I'm adding value and my audience is growing. And if you've been watching this show for some time and you haven't left a review, go ahead and do me a favor, leave a review. These reviews are how I keep bringing on rock star guests like I have today. All right, housekeeping is out of the way. Let's go ahead and get into today's show. So Matt is going to be talking about how to, find a contractor, how to evaluate them, how to hold them accountable. And he has a book coming out real soon, The Undercover Contractor. That's his brand. I think his book is somewhere around that. But Matt, man, do us a favor and tell us a little bit about who you are, man, and what you're doing.
I appreciate it. You didn't crush it up bad, man. It's DiBara. So we swapped the O with an A, a little bit of an upgrade. I like getting A's. I didn't get as many as I wanted in school, so I'll take as many as I could get.
Oh yeah.
I appreciate being here. I think what you're doing is awesome. A little bit about me, short little background for those that are listening. My family's been in construction I'm the fourth generation, mainly masonry and concrete, but construction in general. My great-grandfathers came here from Italy, dug holes in the ground, bought lands, built their homes from the ground up. What I think is unique and why I'm so passionate about helping real estate investors and homeowners is because we never set out to be contractors.
Right.
So our background is a little bit different. We set out, when my great-grandfathers came here, they bought land, built houses, and that was really it. They just took the skills they knew because they couldn't afford a builder, didn't have the money, and they lived in Italian neighborhoods outside of Boston. Yeah. And so, friends and family, neighbors would ask them, hey, can you build this? Can you help with this? And so it was never set out to be contractors. There were really people helping their neighbors.
Right.
And so that shifted kind of how I was raised and what I thought about construction, because I never really viewed myself as a quote unquote contractor.
Right.
Which I think is a little bit different. And, for me, I grew up in the trades. I have a company here in Los Angeles. But my real passion now, the company's established, is helping real estate investors and homeowners fix this gap between contractors and the clients.
Yeah.
Because, it breaks my heart to see what's happening in the industry. And I think you've got a lot of great contractors. I think you've got a lot of great real estate investors, a lot of great homeowners, but you got some bad apples in the pie on both sides.
Yeah.
And, really what inspired me to do this was the fact that I grew up with my dad, and some of the best memories I have as a kid was working with my dad, and that relationship between the homeowners and us and being treated like family, and the American dream of owning homes, and just as I got older, I was like, this thing's getting lost. Like, what's happening here? Contractors are suing homeowners are suing contractors. In 2019, the top consumer complaint was contracting. It's just like what's happening here. So I kind of took it upon myself to say, how can I, being on over 4,000 sales appointments, 102 years family experience in the business, how can I add value to both of these sides where you've got these contractors that work so hard and want to do good. You got homeowners that want to pay well and fair for, and real estate investors, fair for a good product. How do we bridge that gap? How do we bring people together?
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. And I did not know that that was the number one complaint that was filed, man. Like, wow, that's crazy.
It's wild. 80% of, homeowners, which I think multifamily real estate investors fall in that category too of, hiring, smaller contracting firms, 80% of homeowners say that they're dissatisfied when they complete a job. So imagine living in a home, or even as an investment, right? You're excited, you've got this investment, and you're going to make some money, and you're an ethical investor, so you want things done right. Yeah. It's like, you spend this money and you're unhappy. We don't have that in any other area. You don't have that in car buying. You don't have that in computers.
Yeah, for sure, man. That's very interesting to hear that. So let's talk about for a moment, you know, most of the people that listen to the podcast, they're in multifamily some form of fashion. And, you know, everybody talks about value add investing because, you know, hey, that's where the home runs are at. But, you know, doing value add, you have to do a lot of renovations, you know, sometimes. And I wanna talk with you about how do we go about finding, you know, the right kind of contractors, you know, because there's, you know, a million contractors out there, some good, some bad. But how do you, you know, what recommendations would you give to someone that's kind of, you know, going down that path of doing value add investing?
Yeah, I love it. And actually, I left this out, but my great grandfathers, so they built 3-story multifamily homes. They had families living on all the floors. They rented them out. That's how they were able to afford it. So my family, literally coming from Italy, started in multifamily. I mean, we've all been in real estate. So that's why the real estate investing space has always been something I'm passionate about, because it's the pursuit of financial freedom, which is what I love. I think that's, there's nothing better than being able to provide for your friends, your family, and yourself. And add value for people, and a living space. So I think that's really cool, which is why I'm super excited to be here. Truly. In terms of some quick actionable steps, I want to get actionable things where we can watch this, listen to it, and put it in place. Here's what I got. The biggest thing that I find, so my book, The Undercover Contractor, How to Not Get Screwed by Your Contractor, I broke it up into 4 parts. You got to find them, vet them, hire them, and manage them.
Okay.
Finding is kind of the searching, building your list. Vetting, you're taking them out of your list, shortening the list. Right. Hire is you're signing the contract. And management is they showed up late or they put the wrong thing in. What do I do, right? How do I manage that process? So I found that it's 4 key areas. The most important area is your find list. I have a quote. If the contractor's not on your find list, they'll never be on your hire list. So it's actually counterintuitive to what most real estate investors do. We live in a world where everything's instant. It's fast, right? We want to just get things done, right? Yeah. Check it off the to-do list, efficiency. And so there's a book, you talked about Rich Dad Poor Dad before we started. There's a book, I've read that book. I think it's awesome. There's another book, Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And basically he talks a little bit about effectiveness versus efficiency. And efficiency is like getting things done quickly. Effectiveness is the ability to do something that has the overall end result. And I always think of finding contractors as being effective rather than efficient. Right. So when we build that list, it's so counterintuitive. A lot of I find homeowners, real estate investors, it's like we go online, we Google search, we're like, oh, this person's got good reviews, I'll call them up, and then I'll kind of try and make it up on the back end.
Yeah.
To me, it's like putting a square peg in a round hole, and then you're trying to whittle the corners down to make it into a circle. Right. And so, what I always implement, and the first takeaway I can give anybody is flip the switch, meaning the time should be spent on the find phase, on building your list of people, and then it should be less and less time in each of those steps. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go through this step by step. Okay, so we're reading the book, and I know you've got a lot of value in this book. So I don't want you to give away all your secrets, but what tips would you give us around finding them? Do we just go hang out at Lowe's in the morning time, or how do we find these contractors, man?
Exactly. No, I love this, and I'll give you. I give my best stuff. Like I this is a passion project for me. I really want to help good, because the more I can help real estate investors find good contractors, the more I'm benefiting those good contractors, which is, near and dear to my heart as well. So, finding, you want to build a big list, 10 to 12 people, maybe even more. There's a certain strategy in how you find, but the first key, right? So we talked a little bit about making sure you got a big find list and knowing this is where the work is. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that you understand what your job is, because if you're asking for the wrong job, okay, you'll never find the right person. So like, for example, if you have an old home, let's say, and you want to restore the cabinets, if you think because they're cracked and uneven or the doors are hanging off, if you think that's cabinet repair and you go calling companies and looking for cabinet repair, but you're a restoration company, you're done. You'll never find it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to search for what we're looking for. Like, there's a difference between bathroom remodel versus, let's say, some people think of like, let's say like bathtub remodel.
Yeah.
Right. And it might not be that, right? If your bathtub's not working or it's broken, it might be a repair. So you want to do a search to figure out, am I looking for the right contractor using the right words? I have a lot of people that, they'll say, there's repairs, restorations, renovations, remodels. You have to use the right adjective.
Right.
And a quick Google search will get you on the right foot. Because if you're thinking you're looking for a remodel, but it's really a repair, or vice versa, or a renovation, or even worse, restoration, that's where I see that. Because if that pillar's not set, you'll never find the right person. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, ask friends and family. But there's a key here. You want to ask friends and family and make sure that it's a job that applies to you. This is the first pitfall I see, right? You're like, all right, I just bought this multifamily. I need a good general contractor, right? So you go and you ask your friends, and you got a cousin or, your wife's sister says, oh, we just put in we built a garage. We had this awesome contractor. He was there early. It's amazing. You go, okay, great. Give me their number.
Yeah.
The problem with that is if they do garages and you've got a multifamily with 20 units, they're extremely different constructions, right?
Right.
So we want to vet the type of work that we're doing to make sure it overlaps. It doesn't mean you shouldn't call that person, but what it means is that you want to make sure that the work overlaps. I see that being a common pitfall. Companies that do flooring. Well, flooring could be tile, it could be hardwood flooring, it could be laminate. So, that's the biggest pitfall, because whenever someone refers something, our guard is usually let down. It's lowered. We're not we're comfortable. We're like, oh, well, you did good for my wife's sister, so you're going to do good for me.
Yep.
And there's a tip here. And I always tell this to my investors is there's a lot of contractors that don't want to turn down work. So if you dangle a big carrot, even if they don't know if they can get it, they still want to, imagine a company, right? This is why I love talking about this stuff, because when you spend a moment to think about it, you go, wow, that makes sense. It's like, imagine a company that's doing small garages, right? They're building garages and they do little remodels, right? And you get a call to remodel a 20-room multifamily place. There's an ethical question here of whether or not you go out and look at that job.
Right.
Well, what do you think that contractor might be thinking? They might be thinking,
they're going
big fish, right? A lot of money.
Right.
So it's up to you as the investor. It's up to you as the homeowner, right? To make sure that you're not dangling this big carrot, because you don't want to leave it up to the contractor to be like, hey, I just bought a lot. I'm going to, renovate these 4 individual condos. Each of them are, 2 stories. I got 8 families living here, like, I mean, they're like, I'll figure it out, they're going.
Right.
So that's the first pitfall is we try not to dangle the carrot, because we don't want to rely on their ethics, even though there's a lot of ethical contractors. The second, I would say, big takeaway tip is the way we look for contractors. Most of it realistically falls online, right? So even if you ask your wife's or sister, let's say in that example, and you go online, you find that company, you want to make sure that you're doing a Google search and looking up these companies. There's a way to handle that search. I like 2 key things, and I go in way more in the book, but 2 quick takeaways. You want to read the about section of the company, right? Because I want to know who started this company, what they're doing, why they're doing it, right? And then you also want to look at the reviews, as many reviews as you can find. But there's a certain way to read reviews, and it's another area where I see we kind of lower our guard where we shouldn't. Yeah. And it's we look at a company and we say, oh, they've got 5 stars. 350 reviews, right? Immediately, what do we feel? Comfort. We're like, oh, this company's good. Yeah. But if we read the reviews and we find out that all of those reviews are for bathroom remodels, and I'm trying to remodel an entire, multifamily place, it's you end up in this disconnect, right? Right. Now, that's the other kind of red flag is a lot of contractors advertise multiple different types of work. It's like, well, I do, house remodel, I do garages, I do bathrooms, I do kitchens. The problem is that contractors, and I know this because I am one, right? Behind the scenes, there's ratios to which they do those jobs, meaning they might have 80% of their money profit at the end of the year, revenue comes from remodeling kitchens, and you're trying to do a whole house. Or you're trying to do, multifamily where you're trying to do, entire units, 20, 30, 40, however big it is, 100, right?
Right.
And those are very different. And so I love to give the example of, think of a chef that only makes this meal twice a year versus the chef that makes it 10 times a day, 6 days a week. Which meal you think is going to be better? Yeah.
Now, so let me ask you a question around that. Is that important? Because, I'm thinking along these lines. If you get somebody that does all bathrooms and you're trying to do renovations on, these multifamily units, is it an issue as well because they don't have the right team built out around them to be able to do the work efficiently?
Yeah, it's a lot of things, right? It's usually the right team, it's the right scale, and construction is all nuanced, right? Like you get into a flow. And so like, if you're doing bathrooms, you've got your plumber, your plumber's used to, they know who does what, because you've got two things. You've got the details, and then you have the start and stop points of all the subcontractors.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a flow where you're used to doing it, right, as a general contractor with your team, it gets really difficult because now the flooring guy's like, wait a minute, I'm not putting the baseboard on because I thought the drywaller was going to do that. And drywaller was like, I'm not doing that. And then the plumber's like, whoa, wait a minute. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not installing the toilets. I'm just stubbing it out. And you end up with all these issues. And then the more they do the complete package, the better off you are. And then obviously there's the quality issue of, the same person that is remodeling a bathroom, which is typically a lot of small, fine details, right? May not be the person you want for, whole units because they might be overly particular. Tile's a good example of that. Like there's large quantity tile installers, and then there's bathroom, kitchen, backsplash people, and they're totally different, completely different worlds.
Like you don't want thought about that.
Oh yeah. You don't want the guy that, the guy or gal that can lay, they're putting in 3,000, 5,000 square feet of tile, running it in. That's a whole different process than in the bathroom. And you're like, okay, is this wall square? Like I've got these little tile, 2x2 squares and I'm putting them in, like completely different.
Yeah. Man, that's interesting. I never thought about that. I would have just assumed, hey, he's a tile guy. He can do it all.
And that's the hardest, I started really realizing there was a problem when, a big light bulb went off for me about 3 years ago when, as a contractor, right, my office gets here in Los Angeles, we get a ton of phone calls a day, and people trust us because I'm big on ethics. And so they're always asking us for referrals. And so I try and give them referrals. And then I realized I was getting a lot of questions about fences, right? They'd be like, oh, who do you know that does a wood fence? And who do you know that does this? And I'd refer people. And then sometimes they'd call me back and be like, oh, they're too expensive, or they don't do that. And I'm like, so we ended up having to build out a spreadsheet for fences, right? And it was like commercial, residential. And then it was, wood, vinyl, metal. And then it was ornamental metal. And then it was, standard metal. And then it was, like Ipe and high quality wood. And then it was, and it was like, I had different companies for all of these. So just to refer a fencing contractor, I had 10 or 12 different names. Like, oh, it's metal, but it's ornamental. You use this. Oh, actually, it's over 300 feet. Yeah, he's too small for that operation. Now you need to use it. And I realized, I'm like, if it's this hard for me as a contractor, knowing all these people, having lunch with them, friends with them, like know their families, to refer people, I'm like, how do you do it if you're not in this world?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, that is insane, man. You're really making some light bulbs go off in my head now. It's like, wow, like that's a lot to go into the due diligence of doing your research side of this to make sure you get it right contractor. Okay, so we got a list together now. We've done our research. We got a list of maybe 15. How do you narrow that list down to halfway to make sure you're choosing the right kind of people?
Yeah, so I mean, we'll glaze over some of these, but so the next phase is the vet, which is you kind of think of it like I give the example in the book of like let's say you're picking apples at an apple orchard to make a pie. The fine phase, you're a little less picky. You're throwing the apples in, right? You're like, all right, I want to get quantity. And then vet is your home, and you're like, all right, which apples am I going to cut up to put in the pie, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, this one's got a worm in it. You're throwing this one out. That's the vetting phase.
Yeah.
So in vetting, what you're looking for is a couple of things. Typically, you're running their license. You're Googling them across multiple sites to make sure that they don't have what I call a throwaway site, meaning contractors will get sometimes a certain site like a Yelp or an Angie's List or whatever site they're on, where they've gotten a bad run of reviews. Yeah. And they'll just push that site down and direct people to other sites where they get all their good reviews. So you want to make sure they didn't toss the site. I think is super important. And then in terms of the vetting phase, it's it's liability insurance, it's workers' comp, it's a lot of the things we generally do. Yeah. And then it's a lot of it is the appointment. So in the vet phase, which starts when you are really going to schedule that appointment, it's what are they like when you meet with them? When do they get you their pricing? It's hard to cover obviously everything right now, but actionable kind of tips that you can take away and take notes on. Right. One of the big ones I like is and I think is really big in the multifamily space is you meet with your contractor. You want to get and receive a really detailed quote. Number one. So I look for, detail. How specific are they? That's a good indicator. Second good indicator is how much does the salesperson or contractor know about the actual work? I usually like looking at that as an indicator. One thing to keep in mind though, and I talk about this in the vet phase is, and it's not so much in the multifamily space, but it sometimes is you have two types of contractors. You have what I call owner operator, and then you have what I call divisional. And divisional means there's a division between the people selling the work and the people doing the work. And owner operator is the general contractor is the one who's going out to the job and is the same person who's managing it. Right. So it's important to know that distinction because you treat them differently. The GC who is meeting with you and going to be managing the work, you have to hold that person to a much higher standard. Yeah. Because it's like, if you're going to oversee these subcontractors, you need to know this stuff. And if you don't, I'm worried. Right. The salesperson I see, especially in multifamily, I see some of my, friends that I have that are, invested in multifamily. We've had companies before where they're like, man, this guy just didn't know all these things and I'm just not going to do it. I'm like, yeah, but is he installing or managing the work? They're like, no. I'm like, well, let's look at this a little further. It doesn't mean they're not right, but you can't always expect that person to know everything. And sometimes, like, I had a friend of mine and he almost passed on a really great company because he was, too hard on the salesperson who was in training, and he came back with this really great quote. And then he revisited the job with his boss. Right. So I'm like, you want to understand, because when you know the structure, you know what to expect. Yeah. Yeah. So my friend would have been in the right, in my opinion, if it was the kind of the owner operator, because if that's the person managing it, you're right. They should know. What type of paint do you use? What's the scheduling like? What do you do for temporary like that should be riddled off. Right. But if it's a salesperson, you really want to vet them, but it comes down to the quote and how they handle knowledge after that. I think is really, really big. Yeah. Yeah. So you get your list narrowed down to 3 guys, and now this is where I'm guessing that the investors having them come out to give quotes to, see, what they'll charge. What do you recommend from an investor's perspective, for choosing quotes? Because it's typically going to be one that's really high and then one that's really low and then one that's in the middle. I mean, I always think the middle makes the most sense because I feel like they're being the fairest, but hey, I don't know. I'm asking the contractor. Yeah, I love that. So what I like to do is, contracting is an interesting world. It's kind of like, and this is why I call it I'm the undercover contractor, is because I'm trying to peel back the curtain for what. So you got a couple of things that happen, right? You got contractors that got a ton of work and they'll shoot the price. So some contracting companies adjust their prices like supply and demand. It's like commodities, like how they do, fuel. They're like, we're running, like the demand's high, the quantity's low. I'm going to pull my prices up. Right. So I think it's important. I cover this way more in the book, but it's important to understand where they're at in that cycle, because you can sometimes get a really good deal with that low person if you understand what their schedule is like. I just thought of one thing too. with multifamily investors, I think there's two key areas where I see that they because the end goal, right, in multifamily is you want a contractor for a fair price that shows up on time, does the work, presents the problems to you, like is your advocate, your right-hand person, and you can trust them. They say, look, this is what we found, there's mold, and you want to be able to trust those decisions and those, those recommendations. So right. Two things, and if this is something, if you're taking notes, you want to write it down, is never say, sharpen your pencil, give me the best quote, like I get the best deal. Like never say that because you're gonna take the contractor is gonna look, and if they're good, especially in this economy, you're gonna be like, I'm gonna add, I know it, and I hate to give the real truth, but that's what I'm doing in this. It's like they look at that and they're like, okay, great, here's an extra 10%. Like it doesn't work. What works, and I think is super, super valuable, is to just be really honest with them. Like, like level with them and say, look, I got this investment here. It's my, I'm really, I definitely need to go. If you can establish what you're looking for in a genuine connective way, there's the right contractor will feel connected to you and want to help you. But I find that in multifamily, when I look at the, what not to do so often, in my opinion, is, try and beat them up, say, look, I want the lowest price, like sharpen your pencil. I'm getting 4 other quotes. Like that stuff to a good contractor. Yeah. Especially in this time, in this climate, they're like, forget it. I got 6 other, I can't even answer the phone fast enough. I'm out. Yeah. Yeah. But if you connect with them and you say, look, I'm really excited. I'd love to work with you. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm going for fair pricing. I'm holding this thing for 4 years. I don't need the 10-year solution, or, really level with them on what you're doing. Because the right contractor can look at that and say, okay, great. I don't need, you don't need granite countertops here. You don't need this type of paint. You don't need this, because they understand what your goals are. But I think, that's where a lot of times I find that there's issues, and really, really explaining the end goals, explaining what you're looking to do, asking for options. So instead of being like, hey, sharpen your pencil, say, well, what would be a little bit more of a cost-effective option here? And what am I not gaining, or what would I be losing if I did that? Yeah. Gotcha. Now I like that question to ask it that way. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay. And then, last question here, and then we're going to wrap it up. When they're doing the job and we're overseeing them, what do we do when they, what's the best practice around, running over time or over budget? What's the best way to handle it or keep them motivated around that? So a couple quick tips. One of them is, in terms of budget, when you're in the hiring stage, you want to start asking them what unexpected, unforeseen costs could happen. Yeah. Right. So you want to start understanding that. I like to ask it up front, and it's just leveling with them and saying, look, I got a budget. The last thing I want to do here is run out of money. Yeah. Right. Like I like clients that are, really honest and open, right. So I want to understand what are the potential issues that I could run into here. Yeah. If you do that on the vet hire stage, right, you're much less likely to be to have unexpected, things. For example, they'll be like, well, I noticed that there's a little bit of staining on this drywall. You might have some mold back here. This might be an extra $2,000 to $3,000 per unit because it's in 3 units. And you can start, so it's not so unforeseen. If you do that with your general contractor, that's one way. Another thing you can do is ask for a walkthrough with the general contractor and the subcontractors. That's a power tip, because you may look at some of the subcontractors and be like, this is not, this is not going to work. They don't, you can ask them some questions. Yeah. And a good GC, I think, general contractor, is going to want to have that walkthrough to make him look good. I mean, this is his execution team. And if he's got a good one, he wants to show him off, he or she. Right. I think that's powerful. Is to say, look, I'm leaning towards working with you. I'm not going to waste your time. But it goes back to being honest with them first. You can't have that conversation if you told them to sharpen their pencil. Right. You know what I mean? Right. So, but if you're honest, you're up front, now you can use that equity and trust you built to say, look, I've got you narrowed down. you're literally the person I want to work with. I'm not here to, I'm not going to pull you along here, but I would love to meet your team, walk through and understand what might come up here for extra money and delays. That's the first thing. You'll eliminate 60 to 70% of your issues with that one, say it's a 1.5 to 2 hour walkthrough.
Yeah.
The next thing is scheduling details in the contract. I think, that's a huge note, is to put what I call an expected schedule in the contract, but it's a give and take, right? Because in the multifamily space, a lot of multifamily owners, they just care about money, right? And they want it low. So, contractors are definitely, at least in my network and the ones I know, a lot of them are hesitant, and so telling them, look, I just want what I call an expected or a tentative schedule, give the contractor the breathing room to not think, well, gosh, if it rains and it's too moist and we can't do the drywall, or we start to get nervous, right? Putting all that in writing. So using the word expected schedule is better because it gives you something to look back at without being like, I'm punishing you for being a week over. Right.
Gotcha. Well, yo, man, that's some really, really good stuff, man. Have you wrote the book yet?
The book is about a month from being finished. And, I wrote it for, like I said, homeowners and real estate investors. I mean, those were the two people in my mind as I'm sitting down doing it. I'm like, what do they need to know to save money, to have a good process and not have to deal with all the nonsense that's out there. Right.
No, I mean, I'm definitely looking forward to it, man. Let me know when it drops. And, I'm definitely going to pick the book up. Just this podcast was very informative. I learned a lot of stuff that I didn't know about before. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom of 4 generations of being in the contracting game, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I really do. I love this stuff. And I want to help. I want to unite. I mean, it should be, you should want to have a coffee with your contractor. You should want to, hey, it's your kid's birthday. That's all. Like, that's where we need to go. There's nothing better than a transaction that works for both parties.
Right. 100%. Okay, man. Tell my listeners, how can they get in touch with you if they want to ask you more questions around this?
Yeah, so it's Matt at the undercovercontractor.com is a great email. I check that, regularly. So always happy to answer questions via email or, on social media, the Undercover Contractor, Instagram, all that good stuff. But yeah, easy guy to get a hold of.
Absolutely, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on the show today, man.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Generational Wealth Through Commercial Real Estate podcast, brought to you by Onyx Capital Investments. Onyx Capital Investments works with investors nationwide to invest in income-producing real estate in emerging markets. Connect online at www.onyxcapitalinvestments.com to learn more about what we're doing. If we have added value to your life, please leave us a review.